oh, you guys did some improvement? That's adorable. It's like, well, the whole idea is to make this place function better. Welcome to Lean by Design podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Gonzalez, alongside my co-host, Lawrence Wong. We are former MBA classmates turned business partners with over 25 years of combined experience in life sciences. From R&D through manufacturing, our experiences have shed light into the complex, ever-changing challenges experienced by this industry and many others. We took a risk, quit our six-figure paying jobs in Boston, biotech, and pharma to start Sigma Lab Consulting. Journey with us as we explore the relationship between people and workflow design. The goal? To learn, inspire, and deliver practical tips to navigate these ever-changing challenges. Stick with us and learn to work smarter, not harder, and be lean by design. Consider this. A recent McKinsey survey highlighted that 70% of process improvement initiatives fail to meet their objectives. Imagine being part of a team that spends months perfecting new workflows only to find out, much like 3 out of 4 companies, you're not getting the results you expected. Or picture a manufacturing firm investing thousands in new quality assurance procedures, only to see error rates remain unchanged. These are not mere hypotheticals, but real scenarios faced by businesses every day. This alarming statistic will be the centerpiece for our discussion today. Together, we'll explore insights and walk through the pitfalls and best practices, emphasizing the need for tangible data, open communication, and the critical role of leadership in ensuring success. From organizations reverting back to old habits despite introducing new processes, to teams overlooking critical tasks leading to bottlenecks, we're here to dissect it all. So grab your headphones and get ready for a deep dive into what truly makes project improvement tick. Welcome back to another episode of Lean by Design podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Gonzalez, here with my co-host, co-founder, mentor, friend, Lawrence Wong. Hello. Yep. Oh yeah, that's right. We've been hanging out enough that we can start to create some superlatives for each other. So I'm okay with that. We work together, we were in class together, and now we're recording podcasts together. So, constant. Trying to be a little bit of a yin and yang, as we build this organization and really bring, knowledge and educate folks out there that, things don't always have to be the way that they are. We have opportunities to make adjustments and make improvements. And, this, what I want to talk about today has to do with that next step. We go into process improvement initiatives, whether or not it's structured or just something that we're doing internally as a function of our corporate goals or our functional goals. But what do we do after that? A lot of times often we'll find that we set those process improvement initiatives up, just like you mentioned before, where you set up a new process and then a month later, you have a backlog of stuff already. Why is that happening? Why is it that every time we set something up, we pat ourselves on the back and then we go on to the next thing? Like, there's nothing new for us to do here. I'm here to say that there's a lot of work that's left to be done. Lawrence, you're as familiar as anyone that in process improvement, it's a cycle. You have to continue to improve those processes and really refine what you're doing. And not only that, you have to have some level of consistency. What we fail to sort of realize as we're putting together this process improvement initiative is that there is some culture and some habits that need to form. A lot of the issues that we experience usually come from some bad habit where we go in, we get trained, and oh yeah, you don't have to worry about that stuff. Like all we do is just send it to this email address and they take care of it. I can't tell you how often I've had those sort of directives thinking, so I just send this off and you leave off all these different spaces that we're supposed to fill out just because you deem that it's not necessary. How does the other group that's on the receiving end of this form or document, et cetera, how are they going to feel about us kind of, dare I say, half-assing the work here? So, there's a fair bit of work that needs to happen to change the habits that have been created within the organization, to change the mindset of that function, of that department, into one that is, hey, let's do it right. Let's do it right the first time. And then we don't get this kind of cycle of having to redo work, because that kills us, man. The amount of rework that's being done on a daily basis is astounding. And not in any, research, you're gonna have a lot of, testing and trials and research. So of course you're going to be doing, repeats and, this didn't work out, that didn't work out. Even then, I think there are spaces that we can be a little bit, a little bit more knowledgeable about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and really putting the best practices rather than focused on how fast we're getting something done or how quick the data is coming, or, oh, it's the end of the day and, I got a little bit lazy. Well, now you're a little bit lazy is adding, another 2 days of work that wasn't originally planned.
Yeah, I think so. What you brought up before, where you improve something and then somehow a month later everything kind of falls off the wagon and everything kind of goes back to square one. I think there are probably 1,000 reasons why this happens. Some thoughts that come to mind are, well, maybe the process that you were improving wasn't that important, so maybe people weren't paying attention to it. I think 2, maybe there's nobody owning the actual process. So I think when a team builds something together, they have more, I would say, skin in the game, because they've designed this process and they have kind of more effort that they've put in, so they care about it more, right? I think the other point too is, where does this align with the overall organization's goals, right? Because you don't want a team of people just working on things that they improve and then management doesn't recognize that. I find that happens a lot, where there was a lot of pain being felt by some of the end users that are doing something daily, and they'll improve something, but then management doesn't really acknowledge it, or maybe they don't see it. And so it quickly gets, I wouldn't say the word is ignored, but there's more priority placed on other things. And I think those kind of 3 things that I mentioned come to mind when I hear process improvement initiatives failing after people have spent so much time on it.
Yeah, it's almost like, oh, you guys did some improvement? That's adorable. It's like, well, the whole idea is to make this place function better. And I think one of the things that we tend to ignore about those process improvement initiatives is that people stick around when they find that a company is actively working to improve upon the processes they have. I've had friends of mine that, coworkers at the time, that have left organizations because they said, this company doesn't have their ish together. How does that feel as an organization to see that your turnover is so high, and, oh, we have the best managers, the best, scientists, the best, people from this group, from that group, but there's such a struggle because to do the day-to-day work, it's hard. Oh, I don't want to do this. Well, why not? Well, because I can't find the folder that I'm supposed to do it in, the PowerPoint slide I'm supposed to add it in, when this is supposed to be due. The list goes on and on and on. It's these processes that don't really exist. And, these processes are designed to give you almost like a step-by-step approach and develop that consistency in that organization. I mean, that consistency is what we want. That consistency is what drives growth. It's not speed. Speed is going to probably lead to a bunch of errors. I mean, think about anything that goes super fast. Usually something bad happens later. So
yeah, you might be going fast in the wrong direction, right? That's the other point too.
That's the other thing too. These processes are built for a certain reason. They're designed for a certain reason. And, I think it's important and I'll say critical for folks to recognize that and, come into organizations and think to themselves, what can be done? And and once that's done, how do we carry it out? To your point about having leadership input and leadership acknowledgement, I just received an email yesterday from the top leadership from one of my clients, and it was from the COO and everybody else. All of the C-level leaders jumped in on applauding the efforts, on applauding the work, and it's not done. That type of thing is not done, and we had. I've seen in my experience of, okay, well, what do we do next? And I've even seen from senior folks, well, we didn't really think of how we want to measure this. Okay. So time out. We have gone 3-4 months into a process improvement initiative. There's kicking and screaming on changing any of the processes. Eventually we were able to corral that and determine, okay, these are the things that we're going to accomplish. And then at the end of those 3 months, we have no idea how to determine if it worked or not. Come on. I mean, this is, do we want to go to work and struggle to do the things that we are being paid to do simply because there's bad process, or because we don't feel that we have time in our day to numerically compute how many times an error happens? Let's say that you have to fill out a documentation to onboard a new consultant, but everybody is constantly uploading that document incorrectly. And then, then the blame goes, well, this team took so long to review because, I don't even know why. And so we haven't had a chance to onboard, X person. Well, there was errors in there. And until we start to create the metrics and the numbers and recording of errors and inconsistencies, you're never going to improve that process. All you're doing is having an initiative that allowed you to create a new workflow, that allowed you to understand a little bit further that cycle of work within the organization, that department, et cetera. And that's it. Like, it's just a documentation. If you don't plan to measure that change and understand where, because every function, every process is usually a combination of mini processes inside of it. Now, the only way that whole thing works is if the full process is fluid. So as you start to create these errors, you go, where did this error take place? How often is this error taking place over there? And I'm speaking from an operational standpoint, from a facility standpoint. For yourself, it's the same idea. You don't look at a whole, a whole system full of tanks and pipes and valves and et cetera, and go, oh, this whole system stinks. No, you try to find where that error happened and you fix that error. In the same way, when you're looking at, operations, when you're looking at processes that organizations have, internal processes, how we communicate to vendors, how we onboard people, how we onboard, alliances, how we work with those alliances. These are all many processes that occur within operations. We have to take a look back and go, okay, well, we need to measure this to know if the errors are coming in still, where are they happening? Why? You want to direct your training. You want to direct your learning. You want to direct your messaging to that specific space. It's sort of like having an exam in high school, multiple choice, and everybody gets number 21 wrong. You're not going to go through every single one that pretty much everybody got right. You're going to focus on the one that people got wrong and go, let's talk about this. This is what's happening. Was the question worded badly? AKA, was that part of your process not clear? Or are we just negligent? What's causing us to miss that specific question so much in this course? What is the cause of that in our process? Why is that part of our process? And we tend to not look at that. And it doesn't have to be anything, super intense. I just posted a LinkedIn message really about that. Take a Post-it note. Take a Post-it notepad right next to your desk. If this is your day-to-day work, every time something comes into your flow from somebody else or from another department or function related to this particular operations process, and it's incorrectly filled out, it was incorrectly managed, whatever it is, mark a tick. Just a nice little tick, 1, 2, 3, 4, cross it 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, cross it 5. Next thing you know, hey, this week we had 10 instances. I heard this from leadership before, from senior employees going, yeah, I just, I don't know that we have the time. Are you kidding me? We don't have the time to mark off that an error is occurring. Yet we want to improve the process. We're just going to come back and say it didn't work. And that's not true.
It's ironic because people will complain about, oh, this doesn't work, but yet they won't take the time to actually measure like why it's not working. And to your point about measuring performance, I think there's kind of two scenarios where I see, you have some existing process in place, right? And you improve the process. So there should be a new, I would say, baseline performance. And then, so you're looking at like what your target is, and then you're looking at how you're doing, which is your baseline. And hopefully whatever you've done has gotten you over to whatever that target is. So you need to be consistently measuring it. Otherwise, what did we just spend all this time doing, right? Otherwise it was for nothing. I think there's another scenario where I maybe it's more common in the area that we work in, is there just simply are not processes and metrics designed around these like very, I would say, informal things that people are doing. And so when you design the process, right, once you set that up, it's okay to say that this doesn't work, but you have to have some sort of target, right? Like, are you expecting, 100 entries with no error? And once you start to see the errors, like, you need to record that so that you can take the next step in improving it. If you just set up the process,
more than a feeling.
Yeah.
And that actually came up where they said, well, it's more of a feeling. And I just, my eyes got so big just thinking, okay, in the future, if you want to reach out to your senior leadership and say, I need more people, I need a new piece of equipment, this is the data that you've been looking for to go to leadership and say, look how many entries we had last month, in IT. We had 72. And I only have 2 people. I only have 1 person and myself on staff. We can't respond to this load with the number of people. I need more people. Rather than just like, oh, there's just so much. There's just so much to do. Like, how can you tangibly take that and expect to, receive $200,000 toward a new employee because there's too much stuff to do? Look at the process. Look at what, find out what those errors are. Like that, our go-to, I don't know what it is. Our go-to is, I want more people. I want another machine. And I look at it like, well, you're operating right now at like a 40% success rate. Like, that's probably not something that someone would want to spend another $1 million on a machine to add to that. Like, it's not going to get better because you're getting a new person or a new machine. It gets better because you design a new process.
Right.
And you educate yourself. You educate the teams. And this idea of just like, well, it feels this way. You have to remove all biases, because feelings are all biased. You can have 10 solidly executed experiments or, process, that process that you've been working on, 10 executed flawlessly. And then you get one that catches you on the wrong day, catches you on a day when it's raining and you stepped in a mud puddle and you forgot your coffee and it just sets you through the roof. Guess what? That one instance now trumps all the times that you got things right. And you might go, oh my gosh, I can't, this is just too much. Like it drives me insane. And the reality of it is it doesn't really occur, but because it feels this way, we have to get out of this incessant desire to say, we feel this way, therefore we should have a new person, a new, without having any kind of supporting data to suggest why would you need an extra person? What, and it's, oh, there's so much work to do. We need more people to review this and this and this. Well, why are there so many people to review that when if you look over the last year, the entries have not increased, which means the errors are increasing, which means there's a lack of education, which means that people are jumping outside the process. And these are things that we actually can directly influence.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Is your team constantly fighting fires? Are you struggling with productivity and think it's due to inefficiency in your operations? These challenges can be difficult to measure, but not impossible. Sigma Lab Consulting can help you define and prioritize the issues that are negatively impacting your team. We partner with stakeholders to redesign workflows so you can work more efficiently. Find out more at sigmalabconsulting.com.
There's a lot of, I would say, I'm gonna speak to it from like a management perspective where they're looking at a limited amount of time, money, and resources. And if you're going to come to some steering committee and say, hey, we need more resources to do this for this process, and you can demonstrate with data that, yes, this is, a solution for the process to make it better, that's one thing. But to your point, if you're just going to come and say, that one instance out of the 100 times that we ran it, and you're going to complain about that one time, there's no justification to be able to, allocate the resources and time to alleviating that, because it's clearly not, it's a one-off. It's not a routine occurrence, right?
Right.
From your perspective, what are some good practices then, right? Like once a continuous improvement initiative is in place, what do you suggest practitioners look at, a month out, 6 months out, a year out? Like what are those key considerations you would look at once something is in place?
Take small bites. Process improvement is not something that happens in 2 months and it's done. As we mentioned before, it's an iterative process. There's a lot to it, and sometimes there's a lot to a process. Well, start taking small bites. Start taking, you already mentioned that you have a feeling. Okay, I'm assuming you also have a feeling of where things tend to become issues. It's probably not in the very beginning. It's probably not at the very end. It might be just before this portion or just before this happens. Either we lack a signature or we lack numbers or we lack, whatever the case is, you have a semblance of what is a problem within that workflow. So I would say take a couple of each of those. If you have a 20-step process, look at step 4, 11, 13, and 20. And, over the course of the next couple of weeks, have those steps in a number, 1, 10, 14, et cetera, and just next to it, how many errors are happening. This is going to inform you of where either the education for this part of the process was not strong enough, or there was some miscommunication. The documentation was not, had too much open space to really guide people. I know sometimes when we're creating these work instructions or SOPs, we want them to be broad to cover a large sweep of items, but we have to make sure that they're also executable. If, we want to reference this one work instruction for a plethora of items, perhaps keep it, to a low number so that folks actually know, okay, when I go in here, this is the document that I need to look at. If we run this SOP or these work instructions with a broad stroke, sometimes that broad flexibility becomes more of like a question in the mind of somebody that's trying to execute that workflow, of just like, is this related to me? I'm not entirely sure. It's a little bit confusing. But again, it's the education. Take those small bites, and that's something that you would see 3 to 6 months. One of the things that we tried to do was understand how often are new requests coming into this system. Couldn't get an answer. How often are we creating errors? Couldn't get an answer. But the answer I did get was this person, they don't know what to do. Well, there's also no work instructions. So the fact that everybody else is, for lack of a better words, they're knocking this, out of the park, or at least they're doing an acceptable job, on the process. It's either luck or somebody that trained them has a really good idea of how to run the process. Everybody else, they might be new. So you can't just say like, oh, this person. I heard it best from our good friend Ryan Dunlap with Conflictish. Don't look at the person, look at the process. Why has this been so challenging? And then what has the reeducation been? We're so accustomed to when someone asks us a question or someone does something incorrectly, we don't educate back. I have a 2-year-old son. When something is done incorrectly, I try to educate him instead of taking it out of his hand, telling him why something needs to be done. And I try to get him like, oh, okay, buddy. Like, is that where you thought that goes? Okay, this is trash. So let's go ahead and throw this in the trash can. Not like, hey, don't throw that on the floor. Why are you throwing that? And then grabbing it and throwing it in the trash can. Guess what? He didn't learn anything. So just like that, we have to assume that people are coming into our organization with a very top level idea of how the processes work in this organization. It's up to us to actually go, oh, I saw what you did there. Like, just, here's our work instruction. I ask you to look again at steps 14 through 16. So it's really important for us to have blah, blah, blah before this. That's all I'm asking to do. I'm not asking you to set up a whole 30-minute training but educate folks. And the more that you have this conversation, the more that you have this kind of pushing out of the education of this new workflow, et cetera, the more people start to get aligned to it. And not only that, the more people find themselves self-sufficient. So when they're filling it out again, they're like, oh, wait, she sent me, I did that one thing wrong. Let me go grab the work instruction again and see what I'm doing. Because otherwise, if you're just blatantly ignoring all that stuff, that person's probably not going to be in the organization long. But, again, this is just to reiterate, we can't always respond with like, I'm trying to think of the right word for it. We need to respond with more educating. When people ask me, hey, Oscar, I don't know where to find this, or I don't know where this was, I will direct them usually to a dashboard and say, this is a great place to start for a lot of the questions that you have. And if you look over here and here, you can find links to blah, 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 and a report down under here. Now, the next time they have some kind of similar question, they know where to at least start. And I can stop getting the question, Oscar, where do I go? And it's more of like, hey, I got here, but I can't seem to find this exact work instruction. Okay, maybe the nomenclature was a little off. But, working on those like small bits and small chunks. And again, it's a little bit of not just, culture change, but it's also changing our habits. So instead of just trying to get rid of somebody right away, spend the 2 minutes to educate them so that they're not coming back to you to ask the same question because you never educated them the first time. You just took it and said, I'll just deal with it.
Yeah, I think
that's not going to teach anybody anything.
The education piece is crucial, and it's not just like a one-way street where you're just communicating this is the way that you do things. I think you're also giving a chance to somebody who's in it to respond back with, oh, I'm having this issue. Maybe it's something that we need to update on the work instruction. Maybe it's some step in the process that needs to get updated. But right, having just the quantitative measures there, and not having the qualitative measures there, I think needs to be addressed as well, right? Like you can have metrics where it shows a certain number and like your success rate, but I think the other thing you should be doing is creating a safe space for people to give that feedback, so you can take a look at those comments and then make further improvements. Because I think with those two pieces together, then you get a more realistic picture of okay, well, where should we focus next if we want to improve other aspects of our operation.
That's exactly right. I mean, we're looking at here, can we follow the process, and what is the quality of the output? And it's super crucial for us to understand and also distinguish between those two things, because on the one hand, you don't want to get things that are pushed through the system. Everyone filled everything out super fast, but the system has advanced, and now the quality or the information that's put in there is incorrect. Yes, information is put in there, but it's actually incorrect. Now you got to start thinking, okay, is there a step that we've skipped that is allowing our quality to go down? Because it's interesting. It's almost like a catch-22 with folks when they look at big processes. They go, oh my gosh, this takes so long. You know what takes longer? Getting halfway through and having something that was supposed to be done in the very beginning and not being done, and now you got to start all over.
Yep.
I love the phrase. I don't know who coined it. It's, but the fact that we never have enough time to do things right the first time, somehow we find time to do it again, to redo it.
Yeah.
It blows my mind, because when you have the information available to you on how to proceed, and we ignore those things, we're creating rework, which does not push. It reminds me of rowing in crew. I did crew in at VCU when I was there for a little bit back in early 2010s, around there. And if you're not working together and you're constantly slamming the oar and slamming forward, you're basically checking the boat. So instead of the boat going in one direction smoothly because people are rowing, because people are trying to go so fast, their body weight pushes the boat backwards. So you'll see a boat kind of doing this. And to me, that's what that rework is doing. It's like progress, stop, progress, stop, progress, stop.
Right. It's not smooth, and you're having to go through a lot more friction that you necessarily need to. So to your point about, collecting the feedback and holding the trainings and making the process measurable, who at the end of the day, a month out, 6 months out, a year out, who is responsible for making those improvements once you've completed the project? Because I've seen this handled a number of ways, where you have a team put together to do the continuous improvement, and then everybody scatters after so and so gets their belt, and now they're like, okay, this is not my project anymore, and then they vanish, and then somebody else has to kind of deal with some of the, I would say, maintenance issues that go on with making sure the process is in line with what you want to do, but also these incremental improvements that can be done. And they're not necessarily project level improvements. There may be, hey, just update this document, or maybe let's place this sample on this end of the room and not the other one. But whose responsibility is it to own some of these incremental improvements at the end of the day?
All right, so this is
a hot take,
of years of experience. Okay, I'm going to give you a little nugget here that's going to sound very political. Everybody. Now, everybody has a different role to play. If you're doing this process and you're finding that it's clunky, you're finding that it's difficult, you don't have logins, you don't have all these types of issues that constantly come up, it is up to you to voice them to the person. If you have an apartment and your apartment's in shambles, do you keep it all in? And then when you move out, just be like, oh, yeah, that apartment sucks, so I decided to leave. No, you say something to your landlord. I think the people closest to it are going to be those within that given function and the line manager. That line manager needs to be able to support this, because the question that comes to you is, do you want your function to be more productive as a function of external stakeholders, external from your group, internal to the organization, external stakeholders, error proofing that.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Do you suspect your life sciences company could do things more efficiently? Maybe you're seeing costly workflow issues, or maybe the work feels more difficult to perform than necessary, affecting team morale. If any of this resonates, reach out to the team at Sigma Lab Consulting for a free consultation on how we can develop and launch a custom solution fit for your team. Our consultants will build a custom workflow solution for your team to reach peak efficiency. Find out more at www.sigmalabconsulting.com. This is the whole idea. This is where, Sigma Lab Consulting came from. It's the idea of using Lean Six Sigma principles. And one of those at the very end of that is control. You improve, but then you need to control it. How consistent are we in getting this through the gate, through the system? And the less speed bumps that you have, the smoother that ride is going to be over and over again. Then once you receive that consistency, once you achieve that consistency, a year out, then you start to look, okay, we need to understand, now that we're consistent, where can we start to bring in those timelines? Is there anywhere now? Understand, we may not always have the availability to bring in timelines by 20, 30, 40%. It's like saying, hey, we know you have a grocery budget. I want you to cut it in half. Well, you have to actually eat. So no matter what, there's going to be a minimum that you actually have to buy. And there may be a minimum to a process. Well, once we do this, we have a contract with that organization that they have a 5-day turnaround. You can't change anything about that because that's their process. You can't change a CRO's process. That is what their process is. You can maybe negotiate, hey, can you stick us in here or speed it up a little bit, take us out of the queue. But, there's certain things internally that you can have, whether it's, everything to be turned in by Thursday to be available for Monday, one of those things. But we have to constantly, looking at the initiative itself, looking at where that process improvement was. It's going to be a dialogue between the ground troops and the manager. The thing that we tend to do in these meetings that we go with our managers is we give updates. That's all we do is we give updates. And where that's fine, a lot of those updates and stuff sit in documents. They sit in PowerPoints. They sit in Excel files. They sit in this other database system. All that stuff's available. But also, your work is a direct result of all these other folks that are in that organization. You should probably talk about, how has it been? How is it feeling? Are there a lot of errors? And this conversation is within that particular function. And you're right. Usually there's a facilitator that is putting together the process improvement initiative that's very close to it from a process standpoint, very unbiased. They don't do the work. They just understand processes and how to corral folks and how to bring that in, similar to the things that we do. Don't let them go so far. Keep them somewhat aligned, keep them somewhat in the loop of what's happening so that you guys can have a conversation and determine what's going to be the next step. Well, why don't we have a training that focuses just on this? And you guys mentioned that there's a couple of key offenders. Let's make sure that they're a part of the meeting, but we extend the invitation to everybody because we're finding that this is the most common error. And even though some folks maybe did not cause that error, they may have only had one opportunity. So in that situation, so it's important to include a lot of folks that have been involved in that process to say, hey, we're finding a lot of errors here, and make it a dialogue. You don't have to teach it like it's a lecture. Just raise your hand. How has anybody, dealt with that particular situation? Oh, last time I did that, I contacted such and such, and she gave me a form that allowed me to kind of, jump steps because of blah, blah, blah. Talk to your people, talk to your function and figure out, what is the right next step to solve these issues and make sure that we're educating folks, so they are ultimately the ones that are responsible. But again, it's everybody that's up that has any stakeholder that has worked with that function or with that initiative should be open to freely speak on challenges, successes, and the like.
Yeah, I think in our conversation we've kind of gone over looking at a process from evaluating the metrics to make sure that the improvement is actually on track. This training piece, which is really about educating people that are new to the process or maybe unaware of some of the changes. We've talked about sharing responsibility for the ownership of the process and not having all of that responsibility fall on one person that may or may not be part of the organization in some set amount of time. I also think we haven't talked about this yet, but to kind of wrap up the conversation, what sort of incentives do you think need to be in place for all of these I would say good practices to continue? From a management perspective, I feel like if you have a group of process owners that are, going above and beyond and collecting the feedback and improving their teams, there should be some spotlight on these individuals and these teams to say, hey, you guys are doing a awesome job with this, and hey, if there's any other areas within your operation that you feel is in need of some improvement, we are now going to allocate the time, money, and resources to that. And so you're creating this incentive for them to kind of seek out these problems and to kind of solve them. What are your thoughts on the incentive structure there, and what have you seen in the past to kind of not only sustain the current improvement, but to carry that momentum forward to maybe another initiative that might need the same level of support?
I've seen more mature organizations actually include that into their corporate goals. That their corporate goals is a level of improvement because the organization as a whole has a mission to improve the processes that they have internal, and really tweak. There's things that we're doing every day. Every single day we have 15, 20 different processes that we're executing on in order to get our work done. So what are these things that are tedious, manual, prone to error? Look at those things, and to your point, having leadership acknowledge and to highlight those things. Shoot, I don't know, have a pizza party like they did in kindergarten. A lot of times when things went well, we had a pizza party. So there's a lot of different things that we could do, and I think it's really up to the organization and the way that their culture is establishing the praise for identifying core processes in the organization and what that improvement looked like. And not only that, it gives you a sense of accomplishment. I think that the being able to do work every day and not do the face palm or just kind of rolling the eyes because you got this other thing that this other email came in with a submission that was just completely wrong, or I'm frustrated because no one's doing this right. I don't know how many times I've heard that and nothing was done about it ever. And it's so bring in these types of incentive programs, whether it's acknowledgement or almost like a competition, like, hey, find your worst compensation, and ideally you're going to feel it here personally. You're going to feel weight off your shoulders because you're not coming into the office with a stack full of stuff that is error, and it stops you from doing the work that you need to actually push that to the next stage. Oh, I can't do it because this is all wrong. Hopefully it gives a sense of accomplishment and a sense of desire to do that again. That's what's been, I think, special for me about process improvement initiatives is that the seeing a light bulb moment in people, seeing wide eyes that, wow, this was so easy. I think, I can't remember. I think one of the first videos I posted on LinkedIn, I talked about work not having to be hard. If the field that you're in is difficult in nature, that's one thing. But to actually do your job and having just the actions of doing your job in an office setting. Let's just talk about it as an office setting. And it's difficult. Like, doesn't that make you want to scratch your head and go, why is something so basic or so standard incredibly complicated or incredibly difficult to successfully initiate all the way through? Why aren't we having those questions answered? Why aren't we questioning it? We go into organizations and we go, well, this is how they do it. That's fine, but that might have been a process that was implemented years ago, if not a decade ago.
Yeah, I think
Let's feel compelled to have that question to answer that.
Yeah, I think, having, like you said, a pizza party or some sort of incentive where you reward people for going about, making things better, right? So there's a level of, I would say, accomplishment that you get from not only just improving the way that you do things, but if you're able to influence how other people do things, right? And I think there's a level of ownership that you have, and when you go about these changes. I also think that there's a lot of opportunity, right? If you are looking to, let's say, gain more responsibility, this is one of the most obvious opportunities for like driving change management, demonstrating to leadership, hey, I can like take on this responsibility and I can influence change. And that's exactly what they're looking for in somebody who's trying to make things better. And it opens so many more doors for you. I mean, we can probably go on and on about like chances that we've taken in improving things that have opened these doors for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic way to end this conversation, is really, you're coming up and you're, young and you're curious and you want to make an impact. It doesn't have to be necessarily directly related to some scientific discovery. If you're able to find better methods that are more consistent, and whether it's creating the process improvement or just discovering those methods, and being able to execute on those things, people are watching. And you're exactly right. We are direct examples of when you improve a process or improve a system or improve a workflow, people see that and they notice it. And then you do another one and they go, hey, this person's got some chops. I like what they're doing, and I like what they're doing for the organization. And look at how well people are communicating with them about all these issues. It's not about being a listening ear to everybody's troubles. It's about thinking back, and when you have an influence on something, a direct influence on some workflow, being able to say, that's a great suggestion. Let me surface that. Like, I can see where that works. Or, you know what? Yeah, I did see that. We're not seeing that it happens very often. So I don't know that that's something that we would do an initiative on right away, but we are paying attention to it. At least being able to say something like that, it creates a different feel, for the employees that are there. I mean, let's stop this resentment with other functions that happens in every organization and start looking at the process instead of the people as the cause for that ish. I'm going to steal from Ryan again. He's going to kill me.
I mean, there's something to be said about being able to push change throughout your organization to the extent that like management will recognize that, and then they'll start pulling you into things that they want you to work on.
Right. Because you have a different perspective.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I appreciate the time. This was great conversation, and I hope our listeners get something from it too. It's really important to make sure that we're questioning what we're doing and the manner in which we're doing it. We spend a majority of our early adult lives through middle adulthood, through middle age working, and if we can't make it better for us or for the people around us, it's not going to be fun. It's going to be a long, long road. I will say that. And there's a lot of opportunity out there, a lot of opportunity to be seen, a lot of opportunity to be heard, a lot of opportunity to move up quickly when you're executing on things like that.
Absolutely.
In today's discussion, we unraveled some crucial insights on process improvement. First and foremost, the the importance of relying on concrete data rather than mere feelings or isolated incidents cannot be stressed enough. It's also become evident that the foundation of any successful process lies in clear work instructions and SOPs. Without them, confusion and errors are inevitable. We also highlighted the critical role of ongoing dialogue between teams and managers. Open communication fosters understanding and collaboration, enabling teams to address challenges and share successes. On the topic of collaboration, the shared responsibility of process ownership emerged as a vital component. Everyone, from leadership to the front lines, has a part to play in ensuring successful process improvement. Lastly, integrating these initiatives into broader corporate goals and recognizing teams for their efforts creates a culture of commitment and motivation. These key takeaways underscore the multifaceted nature of process improvement and the strategies required for success and to become lean by design. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review, like, and share on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're interested in being on the show or becoming a sponsor, send us a message at leanbydesign@sigmalabconsulting.com. Work smarter before you work harder. Oh my gosh, look at me.